Yeah. Well, actually, if you guys are here anyways, we can make it a dialogue first. So the workshop is supposed to be start smart with AI in academic writing. The goal was to provide students with mindsets for staying out of trouble, tools and mindsets for staying out of trouble, strategies to know when and when not to use AI, and to know how to do that in an ethical way. But since right now we have primarily instructors, and writing center tutors, let's just have an open dialogue, and then I can spiel it along the way. So what are some of the, and actually let me move the mics, just so Inye can be heard if she says things. Unless you want to move up here, but. Oy.
You're my boss, so just tell me what
Not
to do.
this semester, not this semester. So what have you heard as writing center tutors? What have you heard concerns of from students, or what's your experience with, or as an instructor, what's your the concerns that show up?
I've heard a lot of different concerns. Some of the students don't want to use AI.
Mm-hmm.
Have concerns about that. And maybe they're required to for an assignment or something, so they want to know if they really have to. Some of the students are transparent about using AI, even though their faculty aren't asking them to. And they come in for help with, ChatGPT said to write it this way, but I don't know if that's really like what I should do, or is this right? And then we can have a conversation about it.
Yeah.
And then some of the students are not transparent about it, and sit there working on their papers and typing things in while checking their phones. And so if we ask them like leading questions about it, then they'll sometimes show us that they have ChatGPT open on their phone, but they don't want it to like
Be visible on the screen?
Yeah.
Or if they're doing like the testing center style thing or something? Or?
No, it's just that they don't want to like copy it and paste it in, or they're afraid that like they might get in trouble for it.
Because they're literally reading and typing what they see, or some real close version of that?
So if students are transparent, it's good, because then we can have conversations with them about how it's a tool and how they can ask, like questions to further their knowledge and help them brainstorm and maybe like sharpen up their ideas a little bit.
Yeah, yeah.
So I think that it's experiences across the board, honestly.
Yeah.
I think I've had students use it in my classrooms. I had them use it actually for an activity 2 weeks ago in a business writing course that I'm teaching. And we spoke about the affordances and constraints. What are the limitations, for instance, of
Yeah.
these tools? It produces very generic language, so you don't get to really develop and write a new voice. I haven't really met with any students in the tutoring center, the writing center yet, who have spoken to me about using AI. Again, we're only 3 weeks in.
Yeah,
So I
yeah.
met with just one student. Actually, it's been pretty slow. But the one student who I met with, we didn't AI usage didn't come up, but at Gateway, when I was tutoring there, I remember I was working with a student and then just overheard another one saying, "Oh, I'm using this tool and it's helping me write the entire thing." And she seems very excited about using that tool. So my own process of just trying to raise awareness, and then I guess if I have a student who is using it or has questions about it, I'm going to be prepared to answer any questions that they might have, and just guide them, and then also look at the policy or professors' policies, because it's so important. I don't want to just encourage them to use it without being familiar with there's several different policies professors to choose from, guided usage, so that's what I allow in my classroom.
Mm-hmm.
So that's why early on, actually the second week of the semester, I had students use the AI tool of their choice in groups, and gave them a prompt, and they typed in, well, I didn't give them the prompt, I gave them a vague description of a scenario, and then they had to kind of develop a prompt. We spoke about prompt engineering, and the importance of making sure that your prompt is very descriptive, or for the AI tool, whether it's ChatGPT, Copilot, or Gemini, to generate the output that you need in order to successfully complete the task.
Yeah. So I heard you say prompt engineering. There's developing awareness. I don't know why I tried to do that way. Developing just general awareness of how it works, the context, the specific context they're using it in. Those are all key principles, and some of these are like part of that context is who's the audience and how does the professor feel about it, and then you also were talking about like using it in a class to try and get them used to it. There was another one there that I heard, but for now I'll leave it there. With prompt engineering, that's also like a good lesson in genre if we're talking to teachers too. Yeah. And yeah, if you've had, what's been your experience with students in AI at this point over the last year?
Yeah, so a couple came to my mind. One is students. I noticed, especially one student in particular, she just started using ChatGPT as if one of her reference. So right away she's like, oh, according to ChatGPT, blah blah blah, and then I'm like, this is not acceptable. So we had, I just go around and do like a little one-on-one mini talk. Sometimes while they're working on their writing. So I had a conversation. It wasn't like I was putting her on the spot or anything, but kind of casually, like, this is not acceptable, and then like open it up and then have kind of general, something like, I'm okay with the Grammarly, I'm okay with MS Copilot, but if you go beyond that, let me know. And then it's so critical to have that disclaimer within my syllabus, so they kind of know ahead of time. And the other one, it was 2 semesters ago. I think I talked to you about it. He literally did a whole entire thing using AI, and I mean, I've been teaching for 10 years, so you can kind of tell right away, like, oh, this is not his writing style. I can tell immediately that someone else wrote the paper for it, and it took him like a month to admit it because I was waiting, and we were going to have a 3-person meeting, and he didn't show up, vice versa. So it took him a whole month to actually admit it, the fact that he used ChatGPT. And then he excused, oh, I had to help my grandma, and my cousin from ASU suggest, so he wasn't actually taking the ownership. So I was like, wow. So I talked about it with Greg, like, how can I kind of handle professionally, sort of thing. So that was like super eye-opening experience.
Yeah, those are not uncommon story, right? I've definitely had students come into my class and use AI to write whole papers, so I think so since there are no students here, I'll take some time and talk through from a teacher perspective for myself, from a writing teacher perspective specifically. But part of this is specific to academic writing. And so some of the challenges with having students using AI is that it forces us to transform our discipline a little bit and think about writing differently and what it means to be a writer differently and what it means to use technologies. There was research done in 1996 and then a follow-up study in 2006 about the top 20 most common errors in writing. And I think it'd be curious to see how the technological affordances would change till now as well. But one of the big differences between writing in the 90s versus writing in the mid-2000s, one of the big error shifts went from misspelled words to wrong word replacement. And I just highlight that as like, technology, so AI is a form of technology. It mediates how we communicate and interact. And we can see students who have the same mentality about sentence level editing, struggling to spell a word right, or who are rushed for time. their solution to being rushed for time in the 90s was just spell it wrong and move on, like don't have time to edit it. And then in the 2000s, we see spell check come in through, I think, like Word 2003 or something, real Microsoft Office, that kind of thing. And now we've got people being able to quick replace using technology, so we have a little bit cleaner, but we also have one of the highest errors being like they just kind of didn't think about it. And now we've got people who will, like, they're rushed for time, so then they ask AI to do it because they're overbooked. And the fun thing about thinking from the perspective of what's happening in a writer's process is that along the way, writers have to make an ethical decision or a practical decision about what that process looks like. And if they've got an unhealthy process to begin with, they get them, or if there's something weird about something in life that pushes them into needing to make a decision about getting a bad grade or using this tool that could be questionable, they're being set up in a way that doesn't serve them. And so sometimes, if it were in the 90s, maybe the guidance would have been like, we need to teach them to use a thesaurus, or teach them to use a dictionary, or teach them to give them resources to look up the socioculturally normed spelling of a word. If we were in the early 2000s and we were telling students who are having this most common error show up, our advice might be use spell check carefully, don't just select all. And we were doing that for 15 years, right, till late 2020 still. Using that same kind of advice to stop the wrong word swap that had the right letters but in the wrong order, and the computer didn't know the difference because it's just a program. And now we're seeing kind of when students get pushed, it's like our advice and our training changes it. But when we're looking at these, whatever the affordance is along the way, it transforms how writers write. And so when it comes to trying to set up a classroom culture that supports students, part of that is leaning into things that, if we're writing instructors, has been in the research for a long time, but really trying to have a healthy process built into how we teach the course, not just tell them they should, but make it, part of how we build the course. And so I'm kind of leaning into the teacher side of this for a minute, and then I'll go back to students. But if I'm a teacher and I'm trying to design for AI, I want a process that incorporates multiple steps along the way, and this is old hat for us here, I think, but where I'm intentionally making process points equal to product points is one thing that I do, where I have a final product that's supposed to be polished and pretty, and I have anywhere from 2 to 5 steps, depending on how substantial the essay is or whatever the project is, of process work. And that process work lets me as an instructor set up an environment where, one, there's never a need to do 15 hours in 5 hours, right? So I break it up. If I'm supposed to have a 5-week project or essay, we'll keep it simple. If I have a 5-week essay and I tell students the final project is due, they can turn in drafts for feedback along the way if they want, but it's not required, or maybe they'll get bonus points for doing office hours with me or something. Those are optional, and students who get into trouble because they use technology in a way that's unethical, they're the ones who don't have time or space in life because of external factors. So then we have to sometimes make it necessary along the way. So for me, as an example, so if my final product essay is worth 100 points, all this process work is also worth 100 points, or something really close. And I try and make sure that that's set up that way. And so my course is usually broken down by about 30 to 35% points to process work, 30 to 35% points to product, and 30 to 35% points to content and actually engaging with the content of the course, what is writing at a deep level. But if I'm trying to get students to avoid last-minute stress writing, who are struggling to time manage and struggling to balance all the things of life and turning to tools in the wrong way, traditional, not villain style, but anti-hero maybe, or person who got in a bad situation. Sorry, I'm in mythology mode because I taught that Tuesday. But I would try and set this up so that those points are spread out, so that I get, my proposal, my 250 words, 500 words, 750 words, so that they're making incremental progress. And that also lets me check along the way to see how they're writing and how that changes in the final draft. And so if I can look at how their writing is developing over time, I can look for any inconsistencies. So from a teaching standpoint, it's helpful. The other thing I do, and we can talk about kind of the danger, the problems with how I do it and some of the benefits of doing it this way. But let me get this as a shared window. So how I set up my course, again, I'm going to do the teacher thing now first, since there are no students. So the thing I give students, I always frame it, let me see, make sure this is the right one. Did it all come back to that? Yeah. So there's the normal policy that shows up in our syllabi. For me, one part of thinking about AI is it is just another tool that students can use, but it was never okay, ethically, it was never okay to have someone or something do the work that that class is measuring. And so one of the ways we stay out of trouble is if we wouldn't have had someone else do this for us, it's not good to have GPT do it for us. And so if we're going to the Writing Center, we wouldn't have the Writing Center tutors write the essay for us, right? They give us ideas, but we still have to do the work. So that's one thing. It's like it's not doing the work, it's adding to or helping us navigate what needs to happen next, the blind spots we have. So in my classes, one of the things I make sure to anchor is that it was never okay to have someone or something do work that where the work was meant to display your learning, your cognitive development, you can't use GPT or AI on that. That work is like you're breaking the educational trust by doing it that way. Having someone else write your essay means you're turning in work product, not just that's not your own, but the work product is meant to be a representation of you accomplishing the learning. And so if that's not what it does, it's not actually, whether you get a good grade on it or not, you break the trust of the environment. So that's one core principle that makes sure that we recognize the ethical side of this, is that your goal, and the rhetorical purpose of student writing in a writing class is to display that they've learned the things along the way as a writer. And the product is part of that, which is also one of the reasons why we need more than just the final product. We need the steps along the way because writing classes at least have that. Now in other classes, different types of academic writing, I'll talk about in a minute, but that's one key consideration. Now something that I recommend for all my students and that I do for mine, I have two things I do here. And I know this is a lot of text, you can read it, but the short version is I have students use, you could use Word and track changes, but I don't find that it works the same way. So I always have students have a start in Google Docs or Google Slides, and then if I have a discussion that's a substantial post, like a summary of something, they copy paste it over. For all of their essays, I have them write in Google Docs through their student account, and I have them give me editing access so that I can look at the revision history if there's ever a question. Now part of that is, it's twofold. I always use AI violations or struggles or misuse as a mentoring moment, so I'm not looking to just automatically fail anybody, but I'll have that conversation if I see like this essay is clearly more polished than I would usually expect. And when we get into the revision history, we can actually look at someone's writing process. I had one student who, they would write 2 or 3 sentences, and then it was clear that they would get frustrated or stuck, and they'd take that snippet, copy paste over to AI, and get a full paragraph and paste it back in. And so we talked about that process and what was the stressor that led them to shift. And it came down to, they're like, I only had 30 minutes and this wasn't worth my time because I'm an engineering major or whatever it is. And so I've had a number of those kinds of conversations along the way, but that was that student's reasoning. Other times students will be, they may not admit it, but they're like, if you just need me to rewrite it, I can rewrite it. I'm like, yeah, and don't do it that way. But I've started doing this because if I look at the revision history, I can see them writing as humans when they're supposed to write as humans. And if they are trying to get AI to do it in a way or doctor up an AI essay, they might as well take the effort to do it as humans anyways. So it trades off the labor load. So that's one thing I have all students do. I also tell my students do this in your other classes because one, it's always good to have a backup of your work. And two, if a teacher does challenge you for AI and has a policy like the one I have here, you can go and show them, look, I wrote this way. You can see the multiple timestamps and dates. You can see me writing like a human. That's the best I can do to prove to you that I didn't use AI. I'm using Google Docs. I can show you the revision history. And I tell my students, like, I could use support from Turnitin. I know that that's questionable in some places. ASU has turned off that function completely for classes. So you can't use Turnitin at all to check plagiarism or AI. And so mine is like, I hold instructor discretion. If I think there's AI in your work and you didn't do the thing I said here, or if you did and I can see it dropping in a paragraph at a time, I reserve the right to just go, nope. But that's not how I want to approach it. But if I realize it at the end of the semester, the logic I give students is it's fruit from the poison tree legal style, that if one assignment has AI use on it, it makes me put into question all the other work they do. And not every instructor is going to go through every single assignment to make sure to give points on the ones where you didn't use it. And so my advice to students is, one, use Google Drive to CYA, use Google Docs to cover yourself, and know that it's even one use of AI in the wrong way, in the wrong context, an instructor can very well fail you for that. Zero it out, zero out the course, and you're done. You're toast. You have to start over, even if it's week 14 and if they're slow graders or something. And you think you've done okay so far because they haven't caught you, or you didn't realize it was wrong and they didn't notice. But they had this in there the whole time in their syllabus. Most people don't do this if it isn't in their syllabus. But since I also know I can be overly compassionate, this is my strong boundary setting that I do at the beginning that I haven't had to enforce yet. So that's how I set up the course. I would be nervous. Part of the reason I give students this is because I'm nervous about other instructors who I feel I've seen there's always a range, and we have wonderful colleagues, but I'm nervous about the one I don't know, who has something like this and doesn't take the time to talk to the students about it and treat it like a mentoring thing, because you never know. Some people just choose not to have the time, or that's not their pedagogy. They're not there as a mentor. They feel like they're more a gatekeeper for the university, and they have this quality standard. And to me, that's not how I teach compassionately and as a mentor. So I know that I can have that strong policy because it's only for that one time I need to enforce it. So if I'm a teacher and if I'm a writing instructor, I set up my class to make sure that process documents always have points and are required along the way, because it helps students pace out things better instead of 5 weeks crammed into 1 weekend. They're doing steps along the way, and I can see if they're struggling along the way. And I make sure the value of those is high enough to make it worth their while, as opposed to saying, if this is 100 points, each, I've got 4 drafts and each of them is worth 5, so that's only 20, so then they could choose to skip it. I want it to be, I try and make my course impossible to pass if all you do is submit the final product. Because English 101 and 102 especially has understanding writing as a process as core definition. From the teacher side, and that's really kind of being trying to set up the course as like a way to protect students and myself. From a teacher side, but though, how do you three respond to that? Like, what's it make you think about? And you can not agree with me. I'm not going to be upset. It helps me process it too.
Can you rephrase the question for me a little bit?
So what's it make you think about? What's good, bad, or weird about the way I'm presenting it here?
One of the things it makes me think about is those students that have it open on their phone and are typing it in the Google Doc, right?
Mhm.
So they're still, looks like they're typing it through. So there's no like 100% fell sync, right? But
Yeah.
I think that's the difference in being a gatekeeper and being a mentor.
Yeah.
And when I teach, I don't want to be the gatekeeper. I want to give them the tools, give them the resources, have a conversation with them about it so that they understand it. And I think that's what you're doing here. And
Yeah.
that leading with compassion, for those students that really like understand the ethics behind it, it helps.
Yeah.
The students that don't understand the ethics behind it, this is a way for them to start having those conversations and questioning why that process is valuable or.
And what the purpose of school or class is in the first place. Is it to get a grade, or is it to, so it brings up those conversations that I think some of us have anyways, but it makes it really anchored to like their serious consequences, because it's obvious when someone uses AI versus, you know, phones it in possibly.
So like in the FYE class that I teach, there's an assignment for setting a SMART goal.
Hmm.
And the assignment has been revised so that after they've gone through the worksheet, done, you know, all the stages for a SMART goal, they get their final goal, and then they have to submit that to generative AI and see how it's going to rewrite their goal. For me as an instructor, it feels very much like an unnecessary add-on when I'm reading most of the time how AI has rewritten that goal.
Like there's no, like the value added is not what you want it to be.
Yeah, there's not a value added to it.
You're like, they were good on their own. It just kind of made it a straightforward sentence or something.
Sometimes it doesn't even make it a straightforward sentence because what the student has given them is given the AI is so like convoluted with all of the different like the S, the N, the A, the R, the T. You know that the AI just kind of keeps it that way. It might shape up the grammar, but it's not really thinking about. It's not getting to the heart of what it is, and that comes back to this prompt engineering, right? But this is also homework that they're doing on their own outside of class, and so one way that I revise that is to have them actually do the assignment in class, so we can talk about it, not having them do the AI portion of it as a requirement, just as like, you know, if you're interested to see how the AI is going to, what it's going to give back to you, then this is an option for you to do.
And that's I know what some people will do is create a reflective project, you know, or treat it as a final review. The thing where they'll say, you did this thing, let's go see what AI has to say about it. Or you went like, let's as part of our final reflection on the assignment, you wrote this, AI said this about it or transformed it this way. Is that value added based on this rhetorical value or this learning value I'm trying to get you to see, or communication value? Yeah.
I think if for that particular class, if we had more time in the classroom where we were feeding into it, right, having more of these conversations about like AI as a tool, but that's not the purpose of the course. It's not really a writing course, so it's more about introducing them to how to be a successful college student.
And I think that's where it's like, our college doesn't have this, but I think it's CUNY or SUNY or one of the New York universities has, now I can't remember, I feel like that's wrong. There is a university system that has started using as a gen ed AI outcomes. And so if that were the course and we had that here, that would make sense. And you know, but sometimes part of student, like for you, I can see how you could line that up with the student success course, right? Because you're trying to help them know, like, is it really value added the way you're using it? You know, so then why use it in the class, or why use it when it's not okay, kind of thing. So, yeah. There was something you said that also went to another point I was trying to get to from a teaching standpoint. What was the first thing you said? It was a teaching approach. I'll come back to it. I'm sure I'll remember. But Marlene and Inye, what are your kind of experiences on this side of things, based on what I've said?
Well, I agree with much of what you said. I've also spoken to students about the importance of using AI ethically throughout their process. If they use it on an ethical way, then that does harm their credibility as writers. And we spoke, I had them read an assignment article on the affordances and limitations, as I mentioned before. And one of the limitations, which really stood out to me, was that it really weakens their credibility in the sense that they're not engaging in the critical thinking necessary to to complete the assignment, right? They should be out there conducting the research, not resorting to ChatGPT or Copilot to
Yeah.
synthesize sources. They're not doing the synthesis portion of the assignment, and that's what's valuable, and that's really, affecting their learning of the material. So
Yeah.
spoke about how they're supposed to be developing their subject, their expertise in their specific subject or discipline, and they're not really doing that if they're relying on AI tools to complete assignments.
Yeah, and so that's where it's like, that's where context really does matter, because what's the lesson that you want them to learn? If they're supposed to be learning the critical thinking of how to synthesize sources, how to draw connections, that's different than learning how to use a tool to do that, right? If I can ask GPT to synthesize sources for me, does that mean I never needed to learn how to synthesize sources, or is that just a separate skill set? There are some things where I'm like, when I tell students there's a difference between me using GPT for class materials on stuff I already know, but I'm using it to enhance the experience for you guys, versus you using it instead of learning it, right? It's like I can get GPT to do a SWOT analysis, right? And then my boss tells me at work, we need a SWOT analysis on this, this, and this. I put that prompt in, I get the GPT SWOT analysis, I hand it to my boss. They don't know the difference. I don't know how to check it if I don't know SWOT analysis. But if the goal of learning SWOT analysis is learning how to pull apart very fine-tuned parts of a system, and then communicate that, well, now I can use GPT as a skill to get a SWOT analysis and have no idea what it means, and act as an intermediary, which is the person who usually gets fired. Or I can learn the skill of SWOT analysis, and then in every environment I'm going into, now I've got that as a lens. And so that learning makes me more practically capable in a scenario. And so I have to think about, like, am I here for learning? Am I doing the learning I'm supposed to? And is it something that, from a competency standpoint, we want to start doing in our classes as teachers? That's one of the things, that's like the big question now. But if it's not right now, and the course is supposed to be a certain way, and the students are supposed to learn certain things, and some of those are critical thinking strategies, that's where it's like, I don't even want them using GPT as an assist for brainstorming sometimes, because I want them to go through the hard work of brainstorming. I want them practicing bubble mapping, SWOT analysis, fishbone diagramming, stakeholder mapping, whatever it is. If those are the things I've given in class, those are the things I want them using as tools. And that's one of the things when you're using AI to do like math work and other classes, where the point is to learn the steps. And so if it's not helping you learn the steps, the process, the thinking, then you're not doing the learning. Yeah.
I really like what you mentioned about the external factors, because I've also considered that as well.
Yeah.
Students have so much going on outside of school,
Yeah.
and they're taking 12 credits, sometimes 15. Perhaps it would be helpful to look at or have them plan
Yeah.
ahead of time. This assignment is going to take you 5 weeks, and you have work, you have all these other assignments for other classes, and depending on the professor's AI policy, I personally allow them to use it in a guided way.
Yeah.
And during brainstorming, during the early stages or towards the end, when they need to make edits. So maybe just having students plan out what the next couple of weeks are going to look like, and when would be appropriate to use these AI tools.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah, and I remembered what I was going to say, but I'm going to put this other thing on the board so I don't forget. There are two considerations when using AI, and one of them's ethical and one of them's practical. And so that's kind of when we're getting at people who are put under pressure and struggling with a lot of different things, the practicality of AI becomes a meaningful tool. Before I get there, because that's more of a student-oriented thing, I did want to make part of that when we're teaching academic writing, not only the process of things, but also one of the main reasons students go to AI is because of instructors who want clean essays. And I've always had a problem with that, because we don't actually learn, sometimes we overemphasize sentence level correction and clarity in writing classes, and we don't let students believe they're good writers because they have a bunch of other skill sets that make them good writers, because they can't do that one thing as well. And sometimes that disadvantages multilingual students, but or people with dyslexia or other neurodivergent struggles. But when we look at one of the biggest troubles with AI in classrooms that weren't necessarily good pedagogy classrooms, in my opinion anyways, and based on the research too, that sentence level clarity, when we overemphasize that as a value, students don't focus so much on the actual content, saying something meaningful, adding value to their audience, because they're so worried about making a mistake and not having a clear, clean sentence, even if it is not meaningful or useful communication or helpful. And so when we have the people who I think the people I've seen get most upset about AI are the people who focus on sentence level grammar or basic formatting stuff, because if that's 6 weeks of your class is sentence level constructions, and it's a college level or high school level class, and how to do MLA format, those have always been kind of memorizable editing facts where you can clean up anything. And AI does that part really well, fairly predictably, like this, and so that's kind of a meaningful thing. So we have to rethink the position we have on grammar norms or sentence level clarity, because AI can do that for people fairly well. It messes up some of the meaning sometimes, the same way a wrong word would, but it also gets it right sometimes, because sometimes it's the equivalent of having a highly proficient native speaker with internalized patterns is kind of what AI is. It's got all that input, so it can output, even if it doesn't make sense, even if it doesn't know what the words mean, it can output the string that's most intelligible because it's got that pattern depending on how it's trained. For students, there is the struggle of how do we know it's ethical if every class has a different policy? Aren't those supposed to be like moral standards and grounding beliefs that society should share? And then what happens in any context, even if I believe that there's a right way that I should do things, when I'm put into the thick of challenges and trials and I'm tired or my baby's crying, like there were seasons in my life where I was like working 50 hours construction, doing my master's courses, and I would come home and I'd literally be rocking a baby and hand typing an essay one-handed, right? Or doing the dishes with the baby backpack on, or walking around the house with the baby backpack on and like reading a book, and I'm like trying to bounce and the book is bouncing, at like 11 or 12 or 1 in the morning. That's how I got through Edgar Huntley. Anyways, it's a whole other thing. But the practicality of it is when you're put under stress, you have to make choices that display character or a lack thereof. And so one of the challenges with tools that are extremely practical is when they aren't useful, or when they're exceptionally useful like we have now. But part of that does have to do with one thing I did want to talk about. I'm going to skip the process point. Actually, we'll do this. Slideshow. We do have some things we can do. I'm just going to get the slides there. So one part of thinking through AI is recognizing it as a technology or a tool, and thinking as writers, depending on the course. In writing classes, every part of the writing process is you developing skills as a writer, you developing mindsets as a writer. But I've been on an AI panel with someone in history who has no problem with students using AI to do like brainstorming, AI to do source finding or source checking, to do like just to grab a quick summary of history, and then write from there. I know some of our economics classes, you're allowed to use AI on all manner of things, and so whether the learning actually happens by the final product, it depends on what they're measuring, because if it's gen ed curriculum, that's stuff that it's out there on the internet somewhere in good form, and has been for 10 or 15 years. Someone can find a curriculum. Part of what has changed about the role of a teacher in academia is we're more curators of knowledge than we are disseminators of it. So we're helping students know what to focus on for them at the stage they're at. But if we're looking at places where AI can be helpful, first we have to check our context. to make sure that what's allowed, that this has been explicitly allowed by the teacher, or we've asked that specific teacher what their beliefs, what their ideas are with it, how they would like us to use it or not like us to use it. Like, we have that conversation. That's part of the rhetorical triangle, right? And so recognizing the context and audience in any environment, and saying what is the actual sociocultural norm, because that's one part of ethics. Is ethics could be universal or it could be context driven. It's hard not to say everybody has something they believe should be a universal truth, right? How that might get played out, and whether it's, we never lie unless it's to someone with dementia, right? We never steal unless we're hungry, starving, and haven't eaten in 5 days. We never do X, Y, or Z. We never have corporal punishment unless it's a sociopath with a bomb. I'm making it weird, sorry. But it's one of those things, like, we like to think that there are ethical universal principles, and that doesn't mean we shouldn't aim at that, but there are some things that are ethical in context or ethical based on purpose, on what you're trying to accomplish. And so it is important too, as part of that, recognize the context and recognize that tools and technologies mediate human interaction. And so how we use tools can vary. So when we're looking at ways where AI could be useful, we can look at ways that we do textual production. How do we produce a text? How do we produce an essay or whatever project it is in a certain environment? And so in academic writing, there are some things based on the course competencies you should know that assignment is supposed to be accomplishing in you. It should be transformational so that you're showing you're learning. So as a student, you have to ask the question of, what am I supposed to be getting out of this? And what are the layered purposes that my teacher or professor is giving me this, before I go and decide how to use AI to support myself. So those are good questions to have in the back of your head. Now, if we're trying to figure out, we can pull apart the writing process or the production process of a text to say, well, there might be a literal physical production of a text. There are tools we use, whether it's handwriting or scribbling notes or drawing art or whatever it is, trying to design a logo. There's all kinds of things. So there are physical productions, there are physical technologies like printing presses and new printers and things like that. There are digital processes of production where we've got documents, we type in them, we have spell check, we're actively developing a flow chart through PowerPoint slides or word art or whatever it is. And then we have cognitive processes that are the things where we've built in our heads, and it's us driving to and from school or work, and we're allowing our brain to wander through what the topic of our essay is and trying to connect the dots in that downtime. So that's a cognitive process. We're brainstorming, but we haven't outputted it anywhere. And so any one of those areas could be places where AI could be useful. And it may be that we have AI give us a dialogue back and forth, and we've got it set up to talk to us and have a discussion. And so we're asking it questions and getting that feedback almost like a real person, just like you would if you were driving to school with a parent or significant other or kid, someone who you care about. You're having a dialogue. It's like you're brainstorming, but you're doing it with someone else, or you're doing it with a computer. Maybe that's okay in your context. Maybe the digital side of it, the actual production of a mind map, you can create flowcharts digitally. You can use Canva to create all kinds of visual layouts or infographics and that sort of thing. Well, if that is to help you process and engage in the learning, maybe that works for a specific class. If that is product that's supposed to display your learning, you shouldn't have AI do it. Or you should check with the teacher about how they feel about you using it a certain way, and make sure to be really clear about it. But each of these are ways that you could work through it. So recognizing that tools and technologies mediate our communication, but ultimately communication is to grow closer with other humans. I find it really, this is a side note actually, more philosophical. It's interesting that AI has been, that the first thing we did with AI was try and use it to communicate better, right? We use large language models, and one of the first things we do is we have it write essays for it, we have it make for us, we have it write emails for us, we have it revise our resumes, and these sorts of things. The first thing we do is put AI between us and another person because we don't want to be misunderstood. which is really kind of telling about how valuable and important communication is. We're trying to connect with other humans, and we want them to see who we are, and that's a really interesting thing about AI that happens. So anytime AI muddies the waters of who we are, that starts to become a challenge that we want to keep in mind in the back of our heads. So it's more of a side note, more philosophical, but it's kind of a fun thing when we're thinking about language and writing and AI. If we're looking also at things AI can do for us, AI, we might be able to use AI with a variety of different technology categories, and the context is going to determine where. And so some of these are my the 6 categories of writing technologies, and some of them, manual technologies, maybe not as relevant, but let's talk about a few of them. If I'm trying to use AI because I don't have genre knowledge, I don't know the structure that should be used to write a business letter, a bad news letter, a statement of purpose, or something like that, I might be able to ask it for the key rhetorical moves. What is the generic outline structure for that? Is that something I could Google? Yes. Would that have been wrong to Google that, 10 years ago? No. If you said, what's the pattern? Not can I buy this essay that's already done? And so asking it about patterns and then trying to match that pattern, that's a great way to use that. I haven't internalized the genre. I don't have enough data. I can't go find 30 resumes. I'm in mortuary science and I don't know how to do an autopsy report. And those are hard to find unless it's like Michael Jackson's online or something, but I want to know how that genre works. Well, maybe AI is going to help me know the basic structures or key important pieces of information, or develop an awareness of the thing I'm trying to write about. And so that would be, things like that are great ways to use it, where I'm thinking about linguistic or structural needs. It also does help us clean up basic formatting, clean up sentences, and we can tell it to target a certain audience so it can help translate. Teach your thing to me like I'm a 5th grader is, has been an internet thing, internet fun time for, probably 5 to 8 years. Pre-AI, and that's a good exercise. That translation is a good exercise for a person to go through, but also if you're not sure if you can do that, but the most important thing is connecting with someone in a different age group, you can try and have it do that. Now the danger of using AI for these kinds of things is it is going to take, sometimes it will take, if your prompt isn't constructed well, it will do too generic a stereotypical thing, and it will embed bias in the way it's trying to translate you. So those are challenges. The other way we can use AI when it comes to technologies, there's a bunch of other ones, but I'm getting low on time. But I'll talk about the use of AI as an archival strategy. Like AI is really good at giving big overviews. It's really good at kind of having core facts. I've used it to grab things that are kind of general knowledge if you look in the right place, things that are like timeline oriented or common dates throughout history. And if it's something that for my expertise isn't necessary to know perfectly, if I had found it online through a Google search and it just was going to take me a while, that's a reasonable thing to do. If I would go on a site, it's University of Notre Dame's history department, and I'm looking at or rhetoric department, and it's like the history of rhetoric, and it's just got a table of dates. Well, having AI do that, grab the table of dates and make it pretty for me, I don't feel like is going to break anything, unless the course explicitly wants you to learn that. You can have, there's I think NotebookLM. There are a couple different AIs for making flashcards and that kind of thing. Treating it as study tools, those are good things. So that's why context matters. We can have it get better at, we can train it to work with us based on our needs. And I had more to say there, but I'm going to stop on that piece. Altogether, when we're looking at how students are using AI, the biggest thing is, one, you don't want to use it if it doesn't fit the context or audience. So if you've learned anything about the rhetorical triangle, make sure you take into account who you're trying to become. So if you know the rhetorical triangle, it's not the ethos, pathos, logos part of it, but the writer, message, and audience or sender, message, receiver. There's that kind of thing. Who are you trying to become as a writer, as a communicator? How are you trying to communicate? What's the message within that context? And is the thing you're trying to communicate so important that using AI makes it better for your target audience? Or is the act of trying to communicate with your target audience specific information, like in a history class, does it matter to that audience that you not do it a certain way? Then, because you don't want to alienate an audience, for the same reason that if you knew you were talking to someone who had a very different political leaning than you wouldn't start with a joke about them that would generally be considered off color. So if you know someone has concerns about AI, or you know they've said not to use it, or you know that they want you to do it differently for their own reasons, your target audience says don't do it. So unless you are actively trying to offend your target audience, you shouldn't. If we're looking at key principles for starting smart with AI, 1, protect yourself by writing everything in Google Docs. It's a great starting place just as a practical thing to do. That allows you to show a teacher your revision history and protects you against accusation. Make sure you know what the teacher's policy is. So read the syllabus, read it carefully. If you're ever not sure, if there's a gray area, if you want to use it a certain way, send them the message and say, is it allowed to do it this way for this class? And then maybe more than asking them, look at your syllabus. What is the course trying to accomplish? Is the thing you're trying to use AI for breaking one of those accomplishments, keeping you from accomplishing those things personally so that you can bring that skill into other contexts? And if so, you should probably avoid it. If your teacher has given you special permission to brainstorm, to do research, to put together a bibliography, but they're going to want you to do something else with it later, or check and see if you can find it in library databases, whatever it is, use the tools to make to make your connection with other humans better. If the way you're using the tools violates someone else's sense of ethics or sense of trust, then you're not using that tool to connect with another human better. And that's really the core principle with any AI use, is it is a technology that mediates human communication and connection, and if it doesn't help you get better at connecting with other humans, and it doesn't help you grow in the ways you're supposed to grow for a particular context, then you're probably using it wrong. That's where I'm going to end. Unless you guys have other things. That's my final thought.